What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here with another Star Wars Unlimited TCG Force 5 video where I am playing at least 5 games with every leader from Twilight of the Republic. This time we have Obi-Wan Kenobi, Patient Mentor. Let's get into it. So Obi-Wan Kenobi is a leader for Vigilance Heroism. He has the Force, Jedi, and Republic traits. As an action on his leader side, you can exhaust him to heal 1 damage from a unit. No resource cost, just exhaust. Does take an action, though. And then he deploys on 6 resources as a 4/7 with the Sentinel keyword. So units in this arena can't attack your non-Sentinel units or your base. And on attack, heal 1 damage from a unit. If you do, heal 1 damage to, or deal 1 damage. I'm sorry, not heal, deal 1 damage to a different unit. So on his leader side, Obi-Wan has free healing, and his unit side has Sentinel. So the free healing side of things I'll get to in a bit. I think it's an interesting ability and a little more nuanced than it looks at first. But the fact that he deploys as a fairly good stat line with Sentinel is very strong. Sentinel's a really good keyword, and being able to throw that down can really be a good buffer against some of those more aggro builds. He also has a nice ability that both heals and does damage. So you can potentially use the healing to keep your own stuff in play longer and the damage to clear out enemy units. It is worth noting that you could potentially even heal 1 enemy unit to damage another. For instance, if your opponent had 1 unit, let's say Obi-Wan was going to attack and defeat a unit that was already damaged and only had 2 health, and the opponent had another unit that had only 1 health, you could heal 1 of the damage from the unit that Obi-Wan is going to attack. He'll be able to defeat it anyway because he'll do 4 damage, so it doesn't matter if it has 2 or 3 remaining. And the 1 damage you heal then allows you to damage another unit. So that's a nice little trick. Overall, I think he's very strong when deployed. He has the Force keyword as well, which is one of the best keywords in the game. And he has some interesting stuff. Overall, though, I would say that his unit side is stronger than his leader side, but his leader side is not a total joke. So healing can be good on its own, but there's going to be some cases where it's not that good. However, you can also build around it to make your healing more effective. So for instance, Royal Guard Attaché here, this is a 2-cost 2/5, and when played, deal 2 damage to this unit. So for most leaders, this is basically a 2-cost 2/3. However, for Obi-Wan, you can play this and then use your ability to heal it immediately, making it a 2-cost 2/4, and then on the next turn, you can potentially heal it again and make it a 2-cost 2/5. Now, it is going to cost you some actions. That's not very tempo efficient, but you are deriving some extra benefit from that healing beyond just what you would get from normal situations. The healing's also really good at countering the ping damage plus Tarkin Town tactics that have become more common these days. So with decks like Django Tarkin Town, Cad Bane Tarkin Town, Quinlan Tarkin Town, there are a lot of leaders that are using some ability to do ping damage plus Tarkin Town to clear out an enemy unit in the early game. And Obi-Wan is almost uniquely good against that because if they do that 1 damage to your unit, well, you just clear it off with Obi-Wan's ability, and now they are not an eligible target for Tarkin Town. So I think that's pretty cool. The ability can also work well with high HP units, especially Sentinels. Admiral Yularian helps by buffing friendly HP. You'll see him in the deck, which I'll show in a minute. But it isn't as useful against direct defeat effects. So when you're up against that, double blue-eyed in villain control deck, where their removal is not based on damage, it's just things that directly defeat your cards, healing isn't very relevant there. Similarly, healing doesn't work on -X effects. So there are some situations where Obi-Wan's ability is going to be more useful than others. And I think there might be some more to explore here. I'd be interested to see how it works with Grit. I'd be interested to see how it works with other units that inflict damage on themselves. Maybe some of these are villainy, but you could be playing if there were a card like Fifth Brother for heroism, it might be an interesting combination with Obi-Wan's ability because you could use that healing to negate the self-damage that would otherwise be a downside. So here is the deck that I actually built here, Force 5 Obi-Wan. Now my sideboard isn't complete here. It just has some fairly basic ideas, but I'll give you an overview of the deck. So I have, for starting units, I have the Restored Arc 170. This is a unit I've really liked since the core set days. It has a decent stat line, and the Restore 1 is quite strong as well. The Battlefield Marine, another classic from Spark of Rebellion. We then have the Royal Guard Attaché and the Coruscant Guard to round out the 2-drops. Yoda, of course, in the 3-drop slot, as well as the Conquer Dawn Interceptors to defend in space. Admiral Yularen, who I mentioned earlier, he offers some more restore and buffs up your units. Hu Yang, who can buff some of your units, and those buffs that you can give out with a card like that are especially nice because even if he's later removed and you lose the buff, Obi-Wan might have had a chance to heal up any damage the other unit's taken. With other leaders, there's more vulnerability to cards that give conditional HP increases, because if you lose the HP, you might lose the unit as well. But with Obi-Wan, the fact that you can potentially heal the damage that would otherwise be lethal can let those units survive even if their buff gets removed. You have resupply in there just to try and go a little faster. Kanan Jarrus, The Force is With Me, which I think is a strong card here, but not that reliable. I only have it as a 1x, but I could see people running more potentially. Takedown, just solid removal. Fell the Dragon, also solid removal on the other side of things. We have 2 copies of Isla Secura. She is very good with the Energy Conversion Lab. Arguably, we should actually have 3 copies of her. I'm not entirely sure, but I don't really like her without the Energy Conversion Lab in this deck, so I was only at 2. 3 copies of good old Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight, 2 Redemption Medical Frigates, and 3 Reinforcement Walkers. So overall, I thought this was an interesting deck. This is not very different from the initial version of this that I played. So for some of these Force 5 videos, I've played many more than 5 games trying to make the deck work. But to be honest with you, Obi-Wan was successful and effective enough that I felt like, man, this is already in a pretty decent place. I don't need anywhere near as much fine tuning as I do with some of the other decks that I've built for this series, which is cool. Now, is this the be all end all? Probably not. There's other stuff that you can do with it. So one card that I want to flag as being disappointing, though, even in the relatively limited testing that I did, was General's Blade. So General's Blade seemed like it was going to be such a natural fit. 3 cost +3/+3, attaches to a non-vehicle unit. If attached unit is a Jedi, it gains on attack. The next unit you play this phase costs 2 less. That felt to me like it was going to be so strong, because it seemed like, okay, I can play this on Obi-Wan, I can play this on other units, and the problem with it was just that it was worse than Jedi Lightsaber. So Jedi Lightsaber is the same 3 for +3/+3 attached to a non-vehicle unit, and for that one, if the attached unit is a Force unit, it gains on attack. The Defender, if it's a unit, gets -2/-2. I don't know about the exact wording, but that's what it does. And the Jedi Lightsaber is a huge threat. With Yoda or Kanan, it can actually defeat most leaders in one hit. That -2/-2 plus the buffed combat stats are enough to clear the leader. And that is such a good threat and so valuable that it seemed more relevant to me than the decreased cost from General's Blade. I might not have been using it optimally. So I know in theory General's Blade can be a acceleration effect. So for instance, you could in principle swing with a unit that has General's Blade when you have 5 resources, reduce the next unit you play by 2, and then play Luke Skywalker Jedi Knight on your 5 resource turn. It would be amazing. In practice, those situations didn't seem to come up particularly frequently, and I was a little disappointed because if you put it on Obi-Wan himself, you actually don't get the chance to do that sort of accelerated play, for Luke at least, because you're on the 6 resource turn, you just spent 3 resources, so now you only have 3 resources left, and even with the discount by 2, you don't have enough to play something like Luke, so it doesn't really synergize that well with Obi-Wan in particular, at least not in the way that I was hoping. Now, can you use it to accelerate a medical frigate next turn, or a reinforcement walker next turn? Yeah, absolutely. You can swing with Obi-Wan with that General's Blade when you're on your 7 resource turn, and then use the discount to play an 8 cost card. Yep, you can do that. I think I even did do it at least once. But the early Luke setup was something that I thought would be really cool, and it just didn't really work out the way that I was hoping. So Jedi Lightsaber ended up just replacing it. I don't think the blade's awful. I don't think the blade's unplayable, but it didn't end up quite where I wanted. And maybe if you had some more early Jedi units to equip with it and get that buff going sooner to potentially get Luke out or whatever, maybe I would change my mind. But I don't know that I would want to run both this and the Jedi Lightsaber. Other things to potentially try, one of the things, and what I flagged here, is Force synergies. So it binds all things. That is a heal, and if you control a Force unit, you can deal that much damage to another unit. The problem with this is that I don't know if I want to have healing effects when I already have healing effects on my leader. Heal is a relatively niche thing because there's a lot of situations where units get killed in one hit, and for that reason, I'm not sure that I want to invest extra in healing, but It is a really powerful card in the right situation, so I'm not sure. Obi-Wan Kenobi following Fate, so that he has a nice Force synergy. So he's a 6-cost 4/6 Sentinel, and when defeated, you give 2 experience tokens to another friendly unit, and if it's a Force unit, draw a card. So the reason I'm not running him is because I already have an Obi-Wan Kenobi that comes out at 6 resources and is a big Sentinel, and it's my leader. I felt like he was kind of that Obi-Wan unit was kind of redundant with Obi-Wan leader in terms of what he was trying to do. Additionally, if I have Obi-Wan unit and Obi-Wan leader out at the same time, my opponent can just attack the leader instead of the unit to avoid giving that when defeated effect, which made it seem like it was a little anti-synergistic. But it is a really powerful card in the right situation. Mystic Reflection here on the right, give an enemy unit -2/-0 for this phase. If you control a Force unit, give the enemy unit -2/-2 for this phase instead. Seemed good. I am, however, already running Perilous Position, which is a way to give that -2/-2 and potentially defeat units like a Lurking TIE Phantom. It has a little more synergy with its exhaust, and it isn't reliant on having a Force unit out. So the Mystic Reflection struck me as a little more narrow and conditional. One other thing that I think could be interesting, I would be very curious to see what Obi-Wan ends up looking like in, maybe a red deck where you're running Force Throw and some of the stuff like that. And there's really a lot of potential for this leader, I think. I actually found myself liking him more than I was expecting. I was like, man, this is actually a really good leader card. I really like not as much the leader side, but the unit side seems really cool and does something that is unique in the game thus far in terms of a leader that is a big Sentinel and just immediate problem for the opponent. So I don't know. I overall found myself quite liking Obi-Wan, and I think it'll be interesting to see where all he ends up, what version ends up being the best. But that was my take on him, just with this Command Obi-Wan that was successful enough in my early testing that I felt like, hey, this is something that I'm happy to share with the community. So I'll have a link to my build in the video description below. Feel free to check that out. And yeah, let me know what you think about this in the comments. And until next time, I will catch you guys later.